Hughes.
Mr. Acting Deputy President, well, I mean, those opposite, you guys seriously must be hating on the Olympics. You must be hating the fact that we're doing so well and that Australians are being represented by these fantastic athletes that are continuing to do our country proud, because there is seriously nothing you guys can't knock down, discredit and quite plainly misrepresent when it comes to our great nation. I mean, this persistent cry, why do you hate Australia? Seriously, this persistent cry from those opposite about the vaccine rollout, all whilst out there contributing and aiding and abetting and pushing it along, vaccine hesitancy, confusion, misinformation, continuing to spread that. You guys need to have a really, really good hard look at yourselves and start to get on board with Team Australia. Because quite frankly, you're just making it up. And, you know, this claim that we're at the bottom, the world ranking when it comes to the vaccination rate is actually wrong. But, I mean, I understand for those of you opposite that maths isn't exactly your strong suit. So perhaps that lesson when they taught you how to read graphs, you might have been absent or chatting away or looking at what the big government and the unions were supposed to tell you to do and what you needed to think. Because when you see countries like New Zealand underneath our vaccination rate, that means that Australia's not at the bottom. But perhaps it's this inability to read graphs and interpret data is why you guys are unable to recognise a really important graph that continues to show Australia at the bottom, but in this instance, it's at the bottom of rates of death by COVID. Now, I would have thought that was a pretty good graph to be at the bottom of, but I'm not sure you guys have even seen it, let alone can understand it. But can you imagine had we not had the failure of the Andrews government last year, where he absolutely was culpable for multiple and hundreds of deaths? Imagine without his failed effort where we would be. I mean, just unbelievable success when it comes to COVID death rates across Australia. But of course, you guys aren't interested in any of that, aren't interested in any of the economic success, aren't interested in any of the lives and livelihoods that were saved. For you, there's never been a scare campaign you don't like. But back to the vaccine rollout, the ALP, if they have any integrity, but I guess I need to spell that word for you, you need to stop this disgraceful misinformation campaign around AstraZeneca. If it wasn't so serious, it would be entertaining. I mean, the member for Maribyrnong, a man whose leadership aspirations remain strong, the beating of the drum for Albanese, the beating of the drum.
O'Neill, please.
But as the member for Maribyrnong proudly tweeted a photo of his second AZ shot before question time today, showing his support for this effective Australian-made vaccine, confirming that the Doherty Institute today has confirmed that, in fact, AstraZeneca is just as effective as Pfizer. So I ask the opposition leader, is it purely in a bid to create a point of difference between you and the member of Maribyrnong that you continue to withhold support for AstraZeneca? Is that why, when you're asked to support this Australian-made vaccine, you avoid responding, you worm and weasel your way around the question? But if this is not bad enough, not irresponsible enough behaviour from the man who apparently aspires to put himself forward as the alternative Prime Minister of this fantastic nation, he's not just happy feeding into this vaccine misinformation campaign. He's now out there ensuring that the ALP goes to the next election with as many vaccine scaremongers, misinformation merchants and, quite frankly, fantasists as candidates. So we've seen with the pre-selection of Dr Michelle Ananda Raja in the seat of Higgins, the ALP's now confirmed, well, we all knew it already, that they are more interested in political point scoring, in driving division and wedges between Australians, scaring vulnerable cohorts, Shame on all of you. But of course, the absolute worst of these scaremongers and spreaders of misinformation is none other than the Queensland Chief Health Officer, now rebuked by pretty much every epidemiologist in the country, in fact, pretty much anyone with a medical degree. So that wouldn't include some of the commentators that we regularly see on the ABC. But, you know, if the Queensland Premier is so wedded to reward this woman who has shown complete lack of compassion at every opportunity, who's divided and destroyed families and kept them apart, who's spread misinformation, but's never seen a film star or a footballer she won't give a special exemption for at the first opportunity, let's just make her governor now. Get her in there. Get her out of the public view. Get her out of giving information to Queenslanders about what vaccine they should get, because she clearly doesn't know what she's talking about and making ridiculous and, quite frankly, stupid claims. But unlike those opposite, with all of this in mind, the grown-ups are actually here working towards increasing vaccination rates, because we know that's how the country will open back up. And perhaps Senator O'Neill would be better spending her time on her internal pre-selection rather than bothering to spread this pathetic propaganda. But for those that are actually interested in the reality of the vaccine rollout, how many jabs have actually been given to Australians, we know that now more than 12 million jabs have been administered. But we also know now that more than 1 million jabs are being delivered and administered into the arms of Australians every single week. So we've done 12 million today. We're doing over 1 million per week going forward, but not happy over there. Now, like every country around the world, there has been some bumps along the way, because this is unprecedented times. And I know those opposite have perfect hindsight, 2020 vision, and of course, had we all listened to them when they had nothing to say, but of course then have every criticism in the world after, everything would be great. Imagine how good things would be with $387 billion worth of new taxes they wanted to introduce. Thank God they didn't get the opportunity after the last election. But every country around the world experienced a couple of bumps, experienced the vaccine rollouts. The pace picked up as it was rolled out. It was slower at the beginning, and then it continued to exponentially grow. And there were some issues. The PM's acknowledged this. Doesn't hide, doesn't weasel his way around why he won't support AstraZeneca. PM's actually acknowledged that there were some issues at the beginning, and some were well and truly out of our control. I realise you don't acknowledge that. Like, you know, when Victoria had problems, that was the PM's issue, or there was no issue because it was Dan Andrews, but now it's in New South Wales, it's all Gladys's fault, and what's not Gladys's fault, Scott's fault, and, you know, you guys just can't quite get it together. But we've seen these issues resolved. We've seen supply increase. There's actually, you know, an excess supply of AstraZeneca to the point that we're sending it overseas, to the point that the Queensland Chief Health Officer decided she didn't even want them. They've kind of changed that position now. But, you know, there's AstraZeneca available. And so now we have seen over 4.5 million vaccinations given in July. Now, for those of you that don't understand how the rollout has exponentially increased, the 4.5 million vaccines that were delivered in July was more than double than what was delivered in May. So May, and then we have June, and then we have July, for those of you not paying attention in school. And so within those couple of months, we saw an overdoubling of the number of vaccines being delivered from 2.1 million to 4.5 million. So when those opposite like to talk about supply issues, when they're talking about stagnation in the vaccine rollout, aside from the fact they're fundamentally living in the past, but let's face it, they always pretty much do, cling to those old days. But aside from everything I said earlier and the disgraceful behaviour of your chief health officers in Queensland, when you've got all your little cash for comment epidemiologists popping up on the ABC, half of them without even relevant qualifications, they're not even epidemiologists out there talking down AstraZeneca, and then you guys racing out to make sure that they're your candidates. There is no supply issue. You need to stop scaring people about AstraZeneca. There's plenty available. We make it here. Why don't you support Australian jobs?
Thank you, Senator